In recent months, there's been a lot of discussion about people coming across the channel and what they're doing in the UK. But I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about actual people who came across and did some actual damage to parts of the United Kingdom. But I'm not talking about people who came across 10, 15, 20 or 30 years ago. I'm talking about people who came across 110 years ago, in 1915. As a quick history lesson, Britain back then was in the middle of World War I. The trenches were a bloodbath of men, artillery, lead, mud and death. There wasn't just carnage on the ground, there was carnage in the air. The plane had been invented just a few short years earlier, and already the Germans and the British had developed aircraft, fighter aircraft, to do battles in the air. But they weren't just using them to fight each other, they were also using them to bomb. Specifically, the Germans had elected to use zeppelins to try and bomb parts of the UK, including London, some 52 miles that way behind the camera. So what does Britain do in response to this? Well, what they do is they turn to a man called Colonel A Rawlinson, who's charged with developing a mobile artillery response unit. Basically, the idea is you hear about a zeppelin coming over and you drive with your gun on the back of a truck plus a light and go and intercept it and fire it before it drops its payload. And he was the man in charge of developing a network, a system by which this could happen. And it all started from one building in one part of North London, specifically as its name today, Ladbroke Hall, but back then as it was, Talbot Works. And in this video, we're going to retrace his steps. We're going to set off from where he started and see if we can get to where he intercepted his first zeppelin in 1915. You see, it was in October 1915, 110 years ago this month, that Colonel A. Rawlinson went on his first mission, armed with a car, a light on the back of a car, and a gun on the back of a lorry. I'm going to see if we can retrace to some degree his steps on our little drive through history. So join me for the next 5 or 6 minutes as we do just that. And here we are outside Ladbroke Hall, formerly Talbot Works, which is where A. Rawlinson and his unit were based. It was from here in October 1915 that they went to intercept the zeppelin just near Moorgate, and they managed to achieve this journey doing 60 miles an hour through central London in under half an hour. And tonight we're going to see if we can replicate that route. We're going to see how long that journey would take in 2025, 110 years after A. Rawlinson went off to intercept the zeppelin armed with a car, a light and a gun. And to replicate that journey, we're going to be using this, an Isuzu D-Max V-Cross. Now you might be wondering, why are you using a Japanese pickup truck to replicate a journey done by a French lorry in World War I? Well, here's the thing. This isn't the first time an Isuzu has gone to war. You see, in April 2024, I helped donate an Isuzu rodeo to Ukraine. I drove all the way across Europe to Lviv with the charity Pickups for Peace. So as a result, I guess you could say myself and the Isuzu have a bit of history. Now, this Isuzu is the latest pickup truck from the brand. It's a bit of a workhorse. It's got a very powerful, very torquey diesel engine under the bonnet, and this is designed to do heavy work both off and on road in the urban and the actual jungle. And now it's time not to make history, but to replicate it. Of course, there are a few differences between what we're doing in 2025 and what A. Rawlinson did in 1915. And the first thing is the roads. Now, you might think that there's quite a few differences between roads of now and roads of 110 years ago, but in fact, there's quite a few similarities. The traffic is still slow, the roads are still quite bumpy and potholed, and you might occasionally come across a horse. Other than that, there are of course main differences. We've got speed cameras and more thorough speed limits. We've also got far more street furniture to worry about and far more police officers to deal with said street furniture. And what's kind of fascinating is to sort of have this collision of time, and the truth is that some things really don't change. And what we're finding out now is also we have something which A. Rawlinson didn't have at the time, and that's the West Way. You see, he went straight through central London as the crow flies, whereas we're using Google Maps, and that's taking us along a route which actually, by our calculations, should only be about 10 minutes slower than what he managed. And he hit 60 through Holborn over rough ground. We're meanwhile doing this in a very nice air-conditioned comfort with heated seats and Spotify. So we didn't manage to do the journey in under 25 minutes. In fact, we managed it in 35 minutes and 58 seconds, which isn't bad considering modern traffic and the lights that come with it. But here we are, where A Rawlinson intercepted the Zeppelin on that fateful night in October 1915. And what a night it was. By the time they got here, the Zeppelin was overhead, so they didn't have time to set up all their equipment, the light, and aim properly. They had to do it by eye. And they fired at the Zeppelin. They missed, but they wanted to fire again, but there was a problem. You see, the gun they had couldn't do a 180 degrees of fire. There was a period in the middle known as the death zone, whereby they were vulnerable to the Zeppelin's payloads dropping from above. So there was this tense moment where the Zeppelin flies overhead, it drops its payload, it misses them, and then they try and get it on the return run. They miss again, and the Zeppelin drops the rest of its bombs, which land on some houses slightly far away over there. But nevertheless, this was the first time a mobile aerial defence unit had been used against an aerial threat in London. And from there, A. Rawlinson's operation grew. He had personnel all over East Anglia and London. He had lights mounted permanently in certain boroughs of London to try and capture and track the Zeppelins, including in my borough, Wandsworth, the remains of which were there until about 5 years ago. In fact, you can still find a light fixture somewhere on Wandsworth Common. And what it shows, it is symbolic of the innovation that conflict brings, but importantly, also the role that vehicles play in that, because had it not been for the French and Italian lorries, A. Rawlinson would not have been able to take his French and then British guns around London as he sought to protect the capital from this new type of warfare. And as we mark 110 years since that fateful night, and as we mark 85 years since the Blitz, we continue to remember and mark the role of cars in conflict.